Hey, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about our new unit in reading, which is historical fiction. Now, this is one of my favorite genres. And so, what historical fiction is, it is historical. So, that means it's about historical events. So, events that took place in the past. Um, and it is fiction, which means it's fake. So, it's made up stories from the past. However, it is a type of realistic fiction, which means that even though the characters are made up and part of their stories are made up, it's realistic. So it could have happened. So it's not fantasy where there's magic or dragons or anything like that. This is realistic stories from the past. So the characters, some of the characters might be real people, like famous people, maybe presidents or leaders. Um, but there also are going to be a lot of made up characters too. But you'll notice that the characters, the way that they dress or talk or act, might be different than what we're used to, because these characters are from a long time ago. Now, the setting where the story takes place, that's really important in historical fiction. So the author has chosen a specific time period in the past and tried to recreate that in their book. So maybe the foods they eat or the way they transport themselves from one place to another, or just what they do in their daily lives might be a little bit different from what we're used to, again, because the story takes place a long time ago. Okay. Now, the plot is going to be realistic. So, again, there's no magic, dragons, nothing fantasy about it. But what you might notice is there are going to be some real historical events that happened. So these could be like disasters or wars or big historical events that really did happen. And those historical events might take place in the books as well. Okay, so I have a few examples to help illustrate some historical fiction. All right, so here's one of our first ones. This book, Almost a Freedom. Okay, this is about a girl who's trying to escape slavery. Okay, so slavery, a real event in history, but this girl, the character's made up, and her story's made up. Another example, some of you might recognize this text if you read I Survived. Those are historical fiction texts. This one is about Hurricane Katrina, which they did an I Survived story about. So again, a real historical event, a hurricane, but the character and what happens to him are made up. Now, some historical fiction books don't have one big event that they're talking about. They just take place in history and tell stories about people from long ago. So this book, Sky Dancers, this takes place in New York City in the 1930s and 40s, and it talks about a lot of the Native Americans who were working on some of the big skyscrapers and bridges at the time. Okay, so there's lots of other different examples. This is an example of the story takes place during World War II in the United States. This story takes place in Northern Ireland during a time where there were some groups of people that were in a conflict, like a kind of a war with each other. And this book talks about the civil rights movement in the United States. So again, all these have made up characters, but they are talking about real historical events. Okay, and they take place not in the present, but a long time ago. So for your assignment, I want you to try and explain back to me what historical fiction is. Okay, so you're going to click the microphone button on the assignment. I want you to answer this question: what is historical fiction? Good luck.